Today we're plunging into a legendary story, one that has captivated imaginations for decades. It's a tale of incredible ingenuity, sheer will, and what many believed was, well, utterly impossible. We're talking about the infamous Alcatraz. A chilling, windswept island fortress, just sitting out there, isolated in the treacherous, icy currents of San Francisco Bay. For years, Alcatraz wasn't just a prison. It was this potent symbol. It held the reputation as the world's most secure penitentiary.
No doubt. The prevailing wisdom was absolute. No one had ever successfully escaped from the rock.
Not successfully, no.
And then, into this seemingly impregnable environment steps Frank Morris. Now, he wasn't just any prisoner, was he?
No, not at all. He arrived with a, let's say, notorious record. A man famous for breaking out of other high-security institutions.
So when he landed on Alcatraz, the warden, naturally made it abundantly clear this place was different. This was the end of the line. Oh, absolutely. The warden's confidence wasn't misplaced, really. He'd seen plenty like Frank arrive, full of bravado, only to be swiftly broken by the rock's relentless routine and that psychological pressure. But Frank Morris, well, as we'll explore today, he possessed a distinct advantage. He understood something fundamental.
Which what?
That even within the most rigid, most secure systems, the smallest overlooked details, they can become the critical levers for change. Opportunity can hide anywhere.
Right. So from the very moment Frank Morris set foot in his cell, the game was on. You might think, okay, Alcatraz, maximum security, every new prisoner strip searched, every single item confiscated. Yet, during his initial briefing with the warden, Frank pulls off his first incredibly subtle move. He manages to secretly pocket a tiny nail cutter. Now, what does an act like that, so seemingly trivial, tell us immediately about Frank's mindset?
It speaks volumes, really. This wasn't about some grand or dramatic gesture. This was a masterclass in exploiting perceived vulnerabilities and understanding that in a closed system, even the smallest anomaly, like a nail cutter slipping through, can become a fulcrum for massive change.
A tiny crack in the armor.
Exactly. It highlights a core principle of strategic thinking, doesn't it? The most impactful transformations often begin with an almost imperceptible first step, not some big overt act of defiance. And he hit it, quite cleverly, in his Bible, recognizing that, sometimes the most obvious hiding places are the least suspected.
That's fascinating. It's more than just stealth. It's reading the environment, the people, the procedures. And Frank didn't just observe, he asserted himself pretty quickly, didn't he? I'm thinking about that group shower incident with Wolf.
Precisely. Wolf, a larger, more aggressive prisoner, tried to provoke him, test him.
Right.
Frank's immediate, decisive response, engaging Wolf physically, wasn't just about winning a fight. It was calculated.
Right.
It was about establishing dominance, earning immediate respect. In a place like Alcatraz, reputation is everything. He sent a clear message, don't mess with me. This act, while violent, cemented his position. It deterred others from testing him, and it basically carved out a space for himself within the prison's brutal social hierarchy.
So he established his presence, made it clear he wasn't a target. But beyond just confronting adversaries, he also started building crucial relationships, right? Seeing potential allies.
Absolutely. Think of it like mapping the internal network of the prison strategically.
Okay.
He connected with Litmus, an older prisoner who, quite remarkably, kept a pet rat.
A rat? Seriously?
Yeah. And that rat, seemingly insignificant, would later become this unusual sort of discreet communication channel. It's amazing. Then there was English, the prison librarian. Frank cultivated a bond with him over a shared interest in history books. This gave him access to vital, if seemingly innocuous resources later on.
Like paper, maybe?
Exactly. And let's not forget Doc, the artist. Doc painted constantly. His art, this desperate anchor to sanity in that dangerous place. These weren't just friendships, they were strategic alliances. They offered access to information, potentially materials, and just a deeper understanding of the prison's rhythms and its blind spots.
It's incredible how he saw these connections not just as, companionship, but as pieces of a larger puzzle.
Yeah.
And it was through his meticulous observation, even after facing the brutality of solitary confinement, which nobody wanted, that the real aha moment hit.
Right after solitary, a place designed to break spirits.
What was it he noticed when he got back to his cell?
You'd expect him to be defeated, maybe, but instead it seems to have just honed his focus. That night, lying in his cell, he noticed a cockroach.
Okay, a cockroach. Not exactly inspiring.
Not usually, no, but this one was emerging from a small vent. Most people would just swat it, right? Dismiss it as a nuisance. But for Frank, it was this profound revelation. He understood if a cockroach could get through that vent, maybe he could make it bigger. It wasn't just a vent anymore. It was a potential pathway, a fundamental flaw, perhaps, in the prison's supposedly inescapable design.
So that tiny cockroach sparks the core idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the broader environment, the sheer harshness of Alcatraz, that must have fueled the urgency too.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the warden's ruthlessness, especially with Doc's paintings.
That's a critical point. English, the librarian, later described the warden's harshness vividly. The warden, perhaps seeing Doc's art as a form of defiant self-expression, something he couldn't control, ordered all his paintings removed. Just like that. This wasn't just an administrative order. It was a psychological assault on Doc.
And Doc's reaction was extreme, wasn't it?
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
In a desperate act of rebellion, of protest, Doc cut off 3 of his own fingers.
My God.
Yeah. It vividly illustrates the desperate, almost unbearable psychological state of the prisoners. It's a powerful example of how the brutal system itself could inadvertently strengthen the desire for freedom, pushing men like Frank and the others to unimaginable lengths.
And around this time, Frank connects with 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. They knew him from before.
That's right. They recognized him from a previous prison. Their shared history, and perhaps their mutual recognition of Alcatraz's formidable reputation, seems to have solidified something profound in Frank.
What do you mean?
Well, their initial conversation was likely filled with the usual laments about Alcatraz's impossibility, you know. It's surrounded by water, escape's a pipe dream, standard stuff. But for Frank, this very conviction of impossibility among his peers, it just solidified his resolve.
It fueled him.
Exactly. He saw their skepticism not as a deterrent, but as an opportunity. He wasn't just going to escape. He was going to make history, defy the absolute, be the first. That determined spirit made him the natural leader for this audacious plan.
So the stage is set. Frank has this glimmer of hope from a cockroach. He's built alliances. His resolve is ironclad. What was the audacious plan he finally shared with John and Clarence?
Well, the plan was audacious, yes, but also brilliantly logical in its core premise. Frank theorized that Alcatraz's formidable concrete walls, constantly battered by salt water, fierce winds, they must have slowly weakened over time, especially around certain points, like the vents.
Okay, makes sense.
So their strategy was meticulously multi-staged. First, painstakingly scrape away the cement around the ventilation grills in their cells. Then crawl through those vents into a hidden service corridor behind the cells. From there, navigate this labyrinth of pipelines within the prison's infrastructure, reach the roof, and then the final, most terrifying hurdle.
Crossing the bay.
Crossing the unforgiving waters of the San Francisco Bay.
Which brings up the paramount question. How on earth do you cross that treacherous body of water with those currents, no boat, from the world's most secure island prison?
This is where the ingenuity just escalates dramatically, and where Clarence Anglin became utterly indispensable.
Because of his job.
Precisely. Clarence worked in the prison's clothing department. A seemingly mundane job, right? But it gave him access. His mission: pilfer raincoats, standard issue raincoats, and rubber cement, one at a time, discreetly over months.
Raincoats?
Yeah. And Frank, with his unparalleled resourcefulness, envisioned turning those stolen materials into life rafts and life jackets.
No way. Seriously?
Seriously. Imagine the incredible trust and conviction he had to inspire in John and Clarence, to convince them that discarded raincoats could be transformed into their vessel to freedom. It's a testament to his leadership and, frankly, his vision.
That's astonishing. Turning raincoats into a seaworthy craft, the sheer resourcefulness is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But even before getting to that point, that initial work, chipping away at the cement with just that tiny nail cutter, it must have been excruciating. His hands would have been shredded, agonizingly slow.
Oh, it was. The physical toll was immense. His hands covered in scratches, raw injuries. It became painfully clear very quickly that the nail cutter, while a brilliant first step, was just utterly insufficient for the scale of the task.
Not going to cut it, literally.
Exactly. They needed something more substantial, a tool that could accelerate their progress significantly without drawing suspicion.
So chipping away with a nail cutter clearly wasn't sustainable for the scale of this project. What was the solution? This is where his engineering mind really kicks in, isn't it?
It truly does. He needed a stronger tool, and his eyes fell on something deceptively simple: a spoon from the mess hall.
A spoon?
Yep. His next move was brilliant in its simplicity and audacity. He deliberately dirtied a spoon. I think he rubbed it on his shoes, then called a guard over and complained, creating a diversion.
Okay.
With John's help distracting another guard at the front desk, Frank managed to slip an extra spoon into his pocket. Undetected.
Clever. And he needed more materials, too.
Right. He bartered with Litmus, offering his share of sweets for 20 days, which was a significant sacrifice in prison, to collect even more metal bits, coins, whatever he could get.
And what did he do with those collected spoons and bits?
He melted them down using, presumably, some improvised heat source. Combined them with the nail cutter and the coins he'd also acquired, and he forged a far more effective scraping tool, like a small makeshift drill or chisel.
Wow.
What's truly fascinating here is not just the ingenuity, but the applied engineering under extreme duress. He designed and fabricated a custom tool from almost nothing, using only the limited resources available. It showcases an incredible capacity for problem solving.
Incredible. But tools were only half the battle, right? Detection was a constant looming threat. The guards' rounds were relentless. How did they navigate that constant surveillance?
Yeah, this was where the psychological game with the guards became paramount. Charlie Butts, Frank's cell neighbor who joined the plan, often kept watch. But his reliability was apparently inconsistent. A bit nervous, maybe.
Understandable.
English, the librarian, however, proved to be an invaluable asset. Quick thinking, decisive. He distracted a guard once who almost stumbled upon Frank during one of their late-night scraping sessions.
Close call.
Very. And Frank himself displayed incredible mastery of misdirection. There's a story about him needing a carpentry tool. He cleverly bypassed the metal detector by carrying a different, rusty piece of iron just to trigger the alarm, predictably, while hiding the actual tool he needed inside his shoe.
That's thinking multiple steps ahead.
Absolutely. It was all about understanding the system's weaknesses, like predictable guard routines or the limitations of a metal detector, and exploiting them.
So after finally removing the vent roll, they found it. A network of pipelines, the service corridor. It confirmed their path was viable.
Yes, the route was there.
But the guards' rounds were still relentless. They couldn't risk being caught working every single night. They needed to buy more time, create a plausible illusion that they were asleep in their bunks.
And this led to perhaps their most ingenious and psychologically brilliant deception, the creation of fake heads. Dummy heads.
The famous dummy heads.
The very same. They painstakingly gathered newspapers from English, of course, mixed them with maybe soap, cement dust, scraped from the walls.
Resource.
Hair clippings from the barbershop, thanks to John. And paint, possibly smuggled by Charlie. Frank, with surprising artistic skill, sculpted these mixtures. He painted them with eerie realism, flesh tones, added real hair. Designed to look like sleeping prisoners under blankets in their bunks, visible during the guards' quick nighttime checks.
It wasn't just a cover. It was this elaborate, almost theatrical ruse. Commitment.
Total commitment.
Their first test of these dummy heads was absolutely crucial then. How did that go? What did they learn?
Frank undertook the first test alone, placing his dummy head in the bunk to cover his absence. He successfully navigated the vent, got into the corridor, climbed the pipes. He reached the top of the pipeline stack, but immediately encountered their next major obstacle, a heavy, barred iron door leading to the roof access. He simply couldn't open it by himself.
Ah, another roadblock.
Yep. And they nearly got caught during this reconnaissance by a suspicious guard making rounds. They narrowly avoided detection. But this initial run was vital. It confirmed the route worked, yes, but more importantly, it revealed the precise adjustments needed. And it highlighted the sheer physical barrier, that iron door that still stood between them and the outside. They needed more force, more ingenuity.
That iron door became their next major hurdle then. A formidable barrier threatening to end the entire plan right there.
Yeah.
What was their solution to this seemingly impenetrable obstacle?
And this is another moment where their resourcefulness just shines. Charlie, apparently quite observant, spotted an old discarded fan motor during music class, or maybe in a workshop.
Okay, a fan motor.
Yeah. He bartered again with Litmus, offering his share of sweets, that currency of comfort in prison, to acquire the fan motor. Frank, with his signature knack for improvisation, quickly repurposed it. He took the motor, rigged it up somehow, and transformed it into a powerful, albeit probably quite loud, cutting tool, like a makeshift rotary tool or drill.
Ingenious. And with this newly forged tool, they went back to that iron door. I can only imagine the nerve it took to use something like that, making noise inside Alcatraz at night.
The noise must have been tremendous, yeah. They managed to cut or drill through the bars or the lock mechanism of the door, creating a racket that surely resonated through the quiet corridors.
You'd think someone would hear that.
Yet, remarkably, the guards who might have heard it apparently dismissed it, attributing it to the ambient, normal sounds of an aging prison pipe's settling, internal machinery, wind, Who knows? This maybe speaks to a dangerous complacency on the guards' part, or perhaps just the sheer volume of mundane prison noise that they tuned out. But the path was finally definitively clear.
All the way to the roof.
All the way. They set their escape for Tuesday night.
The day of the escape itself must have been fraught with unbearable tension. And then, at breakfast that Tuesday morning, something truly heartbreaking happened.
It was a moment of profound emotional gravity, yeah. Frank, in a subtle gesture of remembrance, placed a chrysanthemum of flower on the breakfast table. Possibly for Doc, who had recently died or been transferred after the finger incident.
A quiet tribute.
A very quiet one. But the warden spotted it immediately, perhaps sensing it as subtle defiance, an unauthorized item. He walked over and crushed the flower without a word. Just a chilling, deliberate assertion of his power and the prison rules.
And Litmus saw this.
Litmus, who clearly cared for Doc, witnessed this callous act. He was apparently overcome with rage and grief. As he moved forward, maybe to confront the warden, he tragically suffered a massive heart attack and collapsed right there, died instantly.
Oh, that's awful, right before the escape.
It underscores the immense human toll of Alcatraz, the psychological breaking point that could be reached, and the profound cost of even small acts of resistance within that system.
A truly devastating moment. And then, almost immediately after Litmus's death, the warden, now clearly agitated, deeply suspicious. He ordered a sudden, immediate search of Frank's cell. A terrifying near miss.
The tension must have been unbearable. I mean, talk about timing. It was a last-minute disruption that could have derailed everything. Frank, however, must have anticipated such a possibility, or just kept things incredibly clean. His cell was immaculate. The search revealed nothing.
But the warden wasn't satisfied.
Still unsatisfied, yeah. He then ordered Frank and Charlie's cells to be changed, moved to different cells, a final desperate attempt perhaps to disrupt any potential plans he sensed were brewing.
Too late, though.
Too late. By then, their tunnel work was done, their secret well kept. The move didn't stop them.
So that night, Tuesday night, the four men, Frank, John, Clarence, and Charlie, were set to meet at the pipeline entrance behind their cells. The moment of truth arrives.
And right then, at the very last moment, one of them, Charlie Butts, got cold feet.
Oh no, after all that work.
The psychology of fear in such an extreme situation. It's fascinating and tragic. Charlie's dream of freedom, the years of planning, the effort, it all slipped away in that final, terrifying moment of decision. As Frank, John, and Clarence moved forward into the darkness of the corridor, Charlie hesitated. He couldn't overcome that immense psychological hurdle.
Do you try to follow?
Reports suggest he did eventually change his mind, maybe minutes later, rushing to the iron door they'd opened. But it was too late. He couldn't manage it alone, or perhaps they'd secured it behind them somehow. His fear, tragically, cost him his chance at freedom.
A stark reminder of the immense individual fortitude required.
Absolutely, to face such overwhelming odds.
But Frank, John, and Clarence pressed on. They navigated the labyrinthine pipelines through the now open iron door, finally reaching the roof of Alcatraz. And from there, their final, terrifying move.
They emerged onto the roof, moving with silent precision, expertly avoiding the sweeping searchlights that constantly patrolled the prison exterior, like ghosts. Then, under the cover of night, they quietly climbed down the outer building, maybe using drain pipes, scaled the formidable perimeter wall, and just disappeared into the darkness, blending into the vastness of the bay surrounding them.
After crossing a short service road, they reached the desolate seashore on the island's edge. And there, under the looming shadow of Alcatraz, they faced their final, most arduous task.
It must have been a desperate, exhausting effort. They had to inflate their handmade raft, the one made from raincoats, by mouth.
By mouth. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Each breath a monumental struggle against fatigue, against the cold, a physical manifestation of their desperate will to survive. It was a race against the rising tide, their own fading strength. Once it was inflated enough, they pushed off into the icy, treacherous waters of the San Francisco Bay, leaving Alcatraz's formidable borders behind them forever. The vast, dark expanse of the bay was now their only boundary. Freedom or death.
The next morning, when guards conducted their routine rounds, everything probably seemed normal at first glance. But as they approached Frank Morris's cell, maybe others too, they noticed something wasn't quite right with the figure in the bunk.
Yeah, maybe the shape was wrong, or it was too still.
And when they finally pulled back the sheet, stunned.
The moment of discovery must have been pure chaos. The sight of Frank's eerily realistic dummy head, and presumably the others too in the bikes, sent shockwaves through the entire prison. News spread like wildfire. Inmates had escaped. From Alcatraz. It was unprecedented, unimaginable, a massive breach of security.
An immediate lockdown, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. Sirens, alarms, a massive search operation was launched immediately. A frantic armada of boats, Coast Guard cutters, helicopters, combing the treacherous waters of the bay.
Now, while some officers clung to the belief, or maybe the hope, that the men must have drowned in the treacherous currents, that was a convenient explanation for the prison's reputation, right?
Very convenient. Preserves the inescapable myth. But the warden, deep down, he seemed to know the truth.
You think so?
The reports suggest he did. Despite the official pronouncements, the desperate search, the warden understood someone had finally achieved the impossible. They'd beaten the rock. He publicly declared them dead, drowned, likely lost at sea, desperately trying to protect Alcatraz's formidable reputation, salvage its image.
But behind the scenes.
Quietly, a secret FBI search continued for years, but intensely for about a year. Yet no bodies were ever found, no confirmed trace ever emerged.
And that absence in itself became the ultimate confirmation for many, didn't it?
Exactly. Frank Morris, along with the Englund brothers, became legends, the geniuses who defied the impossible. Their story echoed around the world.
It's an absolutely powerful story, isn't it? It just leaves us with this lingering question, one that extends far beyond the walls of any prison. What incredible lengths can human ingenuity, meticulous planning, and just that unyielding desire for freedom drive us to, even when facing seemingly insurmountable odds?
Truly, it really makes you wonder about that indomitable spirit, the part of us that refuses to be confined, that seeks out the unseen crack in the most formidable wall, or finds the hidden path across the most treacherous water.
A testament to human will.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for diving deep with us today into this incredible story.